Good morning. I'm Dr. Michael Martin of Sidekick LLC. Today we're in the Magnolia Cemetery of Katy, Texas, where I'm going to be demonstrating what you can expect from a ground penetrating radar survey in your cemetery. So let's say you're a cemetery caretaker and you've got an open section like this in the older area of your cemetery, and you just want a little peace of mind to know that there's no unmarked graves out here whose tombstones got lost 80, 90, 100 years ago because nobody wants to accidentally put a backhoe into someone's grave. Or maybe you're researching your family's genealogy and you found some death certificates or some church records that say some of your ancestors are buried in this cemetery. You went walking around in this wonderfully hot and humid weather, and yet you couldn't find their names on any of the tombstones, and you're a little bit at your wit's end, particularly since there's these big old open sections in the older part of the cemetery. You also know that sometimes gravestones get lost or wooden markers rot away, and therefore at the end of this line of your research, you're faced with the prospect of just having to sit in the frustration of not knowing. And that's when you give me a call. In that first call, you and I are going to talk about logistics and history. Logistics is going to be how far away your site is from Houston, i.e. how long is it going to take me to get out there? How large is the area that you want me to survey with ground penetrating radar? What the site conditions are like? Is it, nice manicured grassy lawn, or is there a decent amount of brush and bramble? And then ultimately what my quote is going to be to do that survey. Next, we're going to talk about history. Who are we looking for? Who are these missing people? Are they settlers, freedmen, slaves, landowners? Any stories you know about them, any context that helps give a fuller picture. I really love listening to these stories, so for me this is going to be the best part of the call. Knowing this information is going to help us put several puzzle pieces together when we look at what the subsurface looks like with the ground penetrating radar survey. After the call, we'll schedule a time for me to come out to your site, and I'm going to show up and put my GPR together. So when I get out, I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to set up tape measures for where you want surveyed. I'm going to set up my GPR. For this demo video, I'm having us go over 6 known graves so that you can see what it looks like and see how the GPR sees a grave. Now, a side note, some people want to know how much energy does this radar put into the ground. It's putting off an electromagnetic pulse. How much is that? Well, if you hold your cell phone, the cell phone that you use to text, make calls, get on the internet, that cell phone puts out 100 times as much energy as this does. This puts 1/100th of the amount of energy that your cell phone does. So if you're okay with your cell phone in your pocket, walking by a grave, this thing will be perfectly safe. There will be no Frankenstein, no zombies, no raising of the dead. It is very safe. Now my GPR on its screen is going to show me live data as I go across the surface. What this is going to do is this is going to give me a line of data, and then I'm going to move over a foot, 18 inches, and I'm going to do another line. And it's when we put all of that together and build a 3D diagram of it that we'll really be able to see what's in the subsurface. Now I've just gone over the first 2 graves out of the 6. Those are these things, these little arcs. Those are the graves. I'll go forward and we'll see 2 more. There's the 3rd, and there's the 4th. And we'll go some more. That thing that we just passed over, this bright line, that's probably going to be one of the concrete curbs. And then over here we've got 2 more arcs. They're a little fainter and it's a little more jumbled. These are the older graves in this area, and that's why they look a little less distinct. Okay, now that fieldwork is done, we're going to look at processing the data and the 3D modeling and what type of results you can expect to see in that. So after I do all the surveying at your site, I'm going to take all of that data, all of those lines of data, and I'm going to stick it onto my laptop and do some processing and some 3D modeling. I can look at a different line, another line, all side by side. You can see this, this one, and then these are kind of jumbled together. Those are the 6 graves that were marked there. There were headstones for them. That's what they look like with one single pass of the GPR over it. We can take all these lines and put them together to create a bird's eye view map. In this view, all of the graves pop out very nicely. Got a couple right there, a couple right there. These again, they're a little older and so they're a little more jumbled, signals less distinct, but they're definitely still there. They definitely pop out very well from the background. And then if we go even just a little bit shallower, we can see the 2 sets of concrete curbings going around 2 sets of graves very, very clearly. Okay, now that we're finished with the 3D modeling with that laptop and figuring out where the graves are, where the concrete curbing is, and from that, we're going to make some really cool, reasonable interpretations about who's where in the subsurface. And this is the really core part and the really powerful part of, think of it as you have half of the pieces in the puzzle and I have the other half of the pieces in the puzzle. And when we put them together, that's when we get the full picture and able to do some really cool things. So like I said earlier, I took you over 6 marked graves so that we could see what they look like in the subsurface. And what we saw were those 6 graves, but we also saw 2 sets of concrete perimeters or concrete curbings that were buried. You don't see those concrete curbings over here. They're under the grass. Now, in and of itself, GPR can't tell you who's in what grave. But if we use a little common sense, each of these 6 graves is actually fairly distinct. First thing, 5 and 6 are probably the oldest graves due to how fuzzy they are. 1 through 4 are going to be the newer ones. This old set has a concrete curbing around it. This newer set has a concrete curbing around it. And this newer one does not have a concrete curbing around it. These seem to occur in 3 pairs, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Generally, husbands and wives are buried side by side, so we can probably safely assume that's what we've got here. From looking at the rest of the graves in the cemetery, then this particular one, this can be a little cemetery dependent. Husbands were on the left and wives were on the right. And so I could assume that 1, 3, and 5 are the husbands, and 2, 4, and 6 are the wives. And so from that, from these being newer, this being older, these 2 having concrete curbings, this one not, husbands generally being on the left in the cemetery, wives generally being on the right. Each of these 6 graves is actually very distinct, and therefore whatever you have from your research, maybe some newspaper articles, time of burial, was this late 1800s, was this early 1900s, we could be able to fit these puzzle pieces together, my GPR data and your research, and make some really reasonable interpretations about who's where. So I hope that this video has helped describe not just how I'm going to do a ground penetrating radar survey at your site, but also how the map produced by that data is going to work alongside your research and our collective common sense to make reasonable interpretations about the subsurface so that we can use that to help you preserve your family's and your community's heritage.